She thought her platinum status gave her the right to choose her neighbors. She thought her money made her untouchable. But when Patricia Sterling looked at the young black mother in seat 2A and demanded she move to the back of the plane, she made the biggest mistake of her life. She didn't see a mother holding a baby. She saw a target. She didn't know that the diaper bag didn't just hold milk bottles. It held a federal badge that would freeze the entire cabin. Watch what happens when entitlement meets the Secret Service, and hard karma doesn't just slap you, it ruins you. The air inside the cabin of Meridian Air Flight 4922 from Washington, D.C. to Los Angeles was stale, smelling faintly of recycled coffee and expensive perfume. It was the kind of atmosphere where silence was a commodity and eye contact was avoided at all costs. Nia Cross adjusted the strap of her shoulder bag, wincing slightly as the weight dug into her blazer. In her arms, 3-year-old Leo was finally asleep, his small head resting heavily against her collarbone. Nia was exhausted. It had been a 72-hour shift involving a protective detail for a visiting dignitary, followed by a frantic rush to pick up her son from her sister's house for this flight. She wasn't wearing her usual tactical gear or her crisp suit. Today, she was in sweatpants, a comfortable hoodie, and worn-out sneakers. She looked like a tired mum. She looked vulnerable. She scanned the first-class cabin. Seat 2A. She moved down the aisle, shielding Leo's head from the overhead bins. She collapsed into the wide leather seat, exhaling a breath she felt like she'd been holding for 3 days. Finally, she whispered, kissing Leo's forehead. The plane was filling up. Businessmen in charcoal suits tapped furiously on phones. Influencers adjusted their ring lights in window seats. Then, the atmosphere shifted. It was a subtle change, like the barometric pressure dropping before a storm. A woman stood at the entrance of the first-class cabin. She was in her late 40s, wearing a cream-colored cashmere coat that probably cost more than Nia's first car. Her blonde hair was coiffed into a helmet of perfection, and her face was set in a permanent expression of dissatisfaction. She held a designer carry-on like a weapon. This was Patricia Sterling, Senior VP of Marketing for Global Tech Solutions, a woman who hadn't heard the word no since 2005. Patricia scanned the cabin, checking her boarding pass. Seat 2B. Her eyes moved to the second row, and she stopped. Her lip curled, not in confusion, but in immediate, visceral disgust. She didn't move to her seat. Instead, she stood right in the aisle, blocking the flow of boarding passengers. She cleared her throat, a loud, sharp sound designed to command attention. Nia didn't look up. She was closing her eyes, trying to steal 5 minutes of rest. "Excuse me," Patricia said, her voice dripping with ice. Nia opened one eye. "Yes?" "You are in my row," Patricia stated. She didn't look at Nia. She looked at the space Nia occupied as if it were contaminated. "I'm in 2A," Nia said softly, trying not to wake Leo. "You must be 2B." Patricia scoffed, a harsh sound that made a man across the aisle look up over his Wall Street Journal. "I am aware of where my seat is. The problem is who I am sitting next to." Nia sat up straighter, the fatigue instantly replaced by a low-level hum of adrenaline, the same hum she felt when scanning a crowd for threats. "I'm sorry?" "Look," Patricia said, leaning in, her perfume overpowering and sickly sweet. "I paid full fare for this ticket, $6,000. I did not pay that money to sit next to a screaming infant. And I certainly didn't pay it to sit next to someone who obviously used miles or an employee pass to get an upgrade." Nia stared at her. It was the assumption that stung the most. The assumption that Nia didn't belong, that her presence devalued Patricia's experience. "My son is asleep," Nia said, her voice steady but cold. "And how I paid for my ticket is none of your business. please sit down. You're blocking the aisle." Patricia's face flushed a deep, blotchy red. She wasn't used to being dismissed. She turned around, snapping her fingers at a passing flight attendant. "You," Patricia barked. "Come here, now." Chloe, a young flight attendant with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes, hurried over. She had dealt with difficult passengers before, but the energy radiating off Patricia was different. It was toxic. "Yes, ma'am? How can I help you?" Chloe asked. "You can help me by escorting this woman back to economy where she belongs," Patricia said loudly. The entire first-class cabin went silent. The typing stopped. The newspapers were lowered. "I'm sorry?" Chloe looked between the two women. "Let me check your boarding passes." Patricia shoved her phone into Chloe's face. "I am a Diamond Medallion member. I demand a seat change. I refuse to sit next to her." She gestured at Naya with a limp wrist, as if Naya were a pile of trash. Naya handed Chloe her paper ticket silently. Chloe checked it. "Ma'am," Chloe said to Patricia, her voice wavering slightly. "This passenger is in her correct seat. Seat 2A. The flight is fully booked. I cannot move her." "Then move me!" Patricia shrieked. "Put me in 1A. Move that man." "First class is full, ma'am," Chloe said. Patricia slammed her hand onto the overhead bin, waking Leo. The toddler started to cry, a high-pitched wail of confusion and fear. "See!" Patricia yelled triumphantly. "It's starting already. I knew it. I will not endure 5 hours of this ghetto behavior." The word hung in the air. Ghetto. Nia's hand instinctively went to the back of Leo's head, soothing him, but her eyes locked onto Patricia's. The fatigue was gone. The mother was gone. The agent had arrived. The silence in the cabin was deafening, broken only by Leo's soft whimpers. Nia rocked him gently, whispering shushing sounds, but her gaze never left Patricia. It wasn't a gaze of anger. It was the flat, analytical stare of a predator assessing prey. "Ma'am," Nia said, her voice dropping an octave, cutting through the tension. "I suggest you sit down. You are disturbing the flight." "Don't you dare tell me what to do," Patricia hissed. She turned her fury back on Chloe. "I want the purser. I want the captain. Get them now. I am not sitting next to this quota hire." A man in seat 3C, a heavy-set guy wearing a polo shirt, leaned forward. "Hey, lady, ease up. The kid was sleeping until you started screaming." Patricia whipped around. "Mind your own business, unless you want to swap seats with me and smell baby vomit for 5 hours." The man recoiled and stayed silent. The bystander effect was in full swing. Everyone saw the racism. Everyone heard the insults. But no one wanted to be in the line of fire of a woman who clearly had lawyers on speed dial. Chloe, the flight attendant, looked near tears. "Ma'am, please take your seat so we can close the doors. We are already behind schedule." "I am not sitting down." Patricia pulled out her phone. "I am recording this. I am going to tweet this to Meridian Air right now. Forced to sit in unsafe conditions with aggressive passengers. We'll see how you like losing your job, honey." She pointed the camera at Chloe, then panned it to Nia. "And here is the problem," Patricia narrated to her phone screen, zooming in on Nia's face. "Look at this. Disgusting. Probably sneaking drugs in that diaper bag." That was the line. Nia didn't lunge. She didn't yell. She simply unbuckled her seatbelt. "Stop filming my son," Nia said. It wasn't a request. "Make me," Patricia sneered, holding the phone closer. "You going to hit me? Do it. Please, do it. I'll own you. I'll own this whole airline." Nia stood up. She was taller than Patricia, 5'10" of lean muscle. She handed the now quiet Leo to the stunned man in seat 3C. "Hold him for a second, please." The man blinked but took the child. Nia stepped into the aisle. She occupied the space with a density that made Patricia take an involuntary step back. "I am asking you one last time," Nia said, her voice deadly calm. "Put the phone away and take your seat, or you will be removed from this plane." Patricia laughed. It was a shrill, manic sound. "Removed? Me? Do you know who I am? I'm Patricia Sterling. I make more in a week than you make in a decade. You think you can remove me?" She poked Nia in the chest with a manicured finger. A hard, sharp jab. "You are nothing," Patricia spat. "You are a nobody, and I am going to make sure you never fly on this airline again." Nia looked down at the finger touching her chest. Assault on a federal officer. Technically, she could arrest her right now. But Nia wanted to give her enough rope to hang herself completely. She wanted there to be zero doubt. "Get the captain!" Patricia screamed at Chloe. "Now, or I sue you personally." Chloe scrambled toward the cockpit, her face pale. The cabin waited. The tension was so thick it felt like the oxygen was being sucked out of the room. Nia stood her ground, hands loose at her sides. Patricia was panting, her face twisted in ugly triumph. She thought she had won. She thought summoning the manager was the ultimate power move. She didn't know the captain was the least of her worries. Captain Miller emerged from the cockpit looking annoyed. He was a man who prided himself on on-time departures, and this commotion was ruining his stats. He adjusted his hat, his eyes scanning the scene. He saw a crying flight attendant, a well-dressed white woman looking indignant, and a black woman in sweatpants standing in the aisle. His bias kicked in before he even heard a word. It was unconscious, perhaps, but it was there. He saw the platinum look of Patricia and the economy look of Nia. "What is the problem here?" Miller asked, his voice booming. Patricia immediately switched gears. The aggression melted into a performance of victimhood. She clasped her hands together, her voice trembling. "Oh, Captain! Thank God you're here!" she cried. "This woman, she's been threatening me. She refused to let me into my seat. She's been cursing, and her child is out of control. I feel unsafe. She actually threatened to hit me." Nia stood silent, watching the performance. Captain Miller turned to Nia. He didn't ask for her side. He didn't look at the other passengers. "Ma'am, you need to grab your things." "Excuse me?" Nia said. "We have a zero-tolerance policy for aggression," Miller said sternly. "I'm going to have to ask you to deplane. We can rebook you on a later flight, perhaps in a cabin where things are calmer." "You're kicking me off?" Nia asked, tilting her head. "Based on her word?" "I'm making a command decision for the safety of the flight," Miller said, crossing his arms. "Now please, don't make this harder than it needs to be. Grab the baby and let's go. Police are waiting at the gate if you refuse." Patricia smirked behind the captain's shoulder. She mouthed the words, "Bye-bye." Nia looked at the captain. "Captain, I urge you to reconsider. You are making a mistake." "The only mistake was letting you up here," Patricia interjected. "Go on. Get out. Go back to the hood." Nia sighed. It was a heavy, sad sigh. She turned back to her seat, but she didn't grab the baby. She grabbed her bag. "I'm glad you mentioned the police, Captain," Nia said. She unzipped the side pocket of the diaper bag. "Don't reach for anything," the captain shouted, stepping back, suddenly fearful she was pulling a weapon. Nia moved slowly, deliberately. Her hand came out holding a black leather wallet. She flipped it open with a practiced flick of her wrist. The gold badge caught the overhead cabin lights. It was heavy, authoritative, and unmistakable to anyone in the industry. Beneath it was a laminated ID card with a holographic seal. United States Secret Service. Special Agent Nia Cross. Protective Intelligence Division. Nia held it up, first to the captain, then she turned and held it directly in Patricia's face. "Special Agent Cross," Naya announced, her voice projecting to the back of the cabin. "Badge number 4922. I am traveling on federal business, and you, Captain Miller, have just attempted to unlawfully remove a federal agent from a flight based on a discriminatory complaint." The captain froze. His face went from red to sheet white in a nanosecond. He stared at the badge, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. Patricia blinked. She squinted at the badge. That's fake. You bought that online." Nia ignored her. She looked at the captain. "Captain, I am invoking 18 U.S. Code, Section 351, interference with a federal agent in the performance of her duties. Furthermore, this passenger has assaulted me. She poked me in the chest, which is battery, and has been disrupting the operation of this aircraft." Nia took a step toward the captain. "Now, who is getting off this plane?" The silence that followed was absolute. The man holding Leo looked at the baby, then at Nia, his eyes wide with awe. Patricia laughed nervously. "Oh, come on. This is a joke, right? You're a babysitter. You can't be Secret Service." Nia turned to Patricia. The look in her eyes was terrifying. "Ms. Sterling, I am done talking to you as a passenger. I am now talking to you as a federal officer. Sit down and shut up, or you will be leaving this airport in handcuffs." But Patricia Sterling didn't know when to fold. She couldn't comprehend a world where her money didn't win. "I am calling the CEO of Meridian," Patricia screamed, grabbing her phone again. "I am going to have your badge. I know people in Washington. You're finished." She dialed a number, putting it on speaker. "Big mistake," Nia whispered. Patricia held the phone aloft like a talisman, her finger hovering over the speaker button. She glared at Nia, her eyes manic. The cabin was deadly silent. Even the air conditioning seemed to have paused to listen. "You picked the wrong woman," Patricia sneered. "Richard Halloway is on the board of directors for Meridian Air. He is also my brother-in-law. When he hears about this, you won't just be off this flight. You'll be in prison for impersonating an officer." Nia didn't flinch. "Make the call." Patricia pressed the button. The line rang once, twice, 3 times. Then a gruff male voice filled the cabin. "Patricia, I'm in a meeting. This better be an emergency." "Richard!" Patricia wailed, her voice cracking theatrically. "I am being attacked. On Flight 492. The captain is incompetent, and there is a woman claiming to be a federal agent threatening me. She has a fake badge. She assaulted me. You need to fire the pilot and have her arrested immediately." There was a pause on the line. "A federal agent?" Richard asked, his tone shifting from annoyed to cautious. "What's her name, Patricia?" Patricia smirked at Nia. "Tell him your fake name, honey." Nia took a step closer to the phone. She spoke clearly, her voice calm and authoritative. "Mr. Halloway, this is Special Agent Nia Cross, Protective Intelligence Division. I believe we met at the G7 summit in Geneva last year when you were consulting on transport logistics." The silence on the other end of the phone was heavier than the silence in the cabin. It stretched for 5 agonizing seconds. Patricia looked at the phone, then at Nia, waiting for Richard to explode in anger at the imposter. Instead, Richard's voice came back, strangled and terrified. Agent Cross? The one who ran the detail for the vice president?" "That's correct, Mr. Halloway," Nia said smoothly. "Currently, your sister-in-law is interfering with a federal operation, assaulting an agent, and creating a significant security risk aboard this aircraft. She is demanding I be removed. I'm curious, as a board member, is it Meridian Air's policy to obstruct federal agents?" "No!" Richard shouted, the panic audible even through the tiny speaker. "No, absolutely not! Patricia, what the hell are you doing?" Patricia's face crumbled. The blood drained from her cheeks, leaving her looking haggard and grey. "Richard, she's lying. She's sitting in economy class with a baby. She looks like a maid." "Shut up, Patricia," Richard roared. "Shut your mouth right now. Do you have any idea who that woman is? She's not just an agent. She's the lead instructor at Quantico. If she says you're interfering, you're interfering. Apologize. Get on your knees and apologize right now before you tank the company's stock." Patricia froze. The phone slipped from her sweaty palm and clattered onto the tray table. Nia looked at the phone, then back at Patricia. "I don't need an apology, Richard. I need law enforcement. Make sure the Port Authority is waiting at the gate. We aren't going anywhere until this security threat is neutralized." I'll call the Chief of Police myself," Richard stammered. "Agent Cross, please accept my deepest apologies. Meridian Air will cooperate fully." Nia reached over and ended the call. She turned to Captain Miller. The pilot was leaning against the bulkhead, looking like he might vomit. He realized he had just tried to kick a high-ranking federal agent off his plane because a rich woman told him to. His retirement plans were flashing before his eyes. "Captain," Nia said. "Agent Cross," Miller squeaked. I had no idea. The protocol. Usually we get a notice." "I am traveling undercover for a reason," Nia said sharply. "A reason that is now compromised because you decided to profile me instead of investigating the situation. You assumed the black woman in sweatpants was the problem, and the woman in Chanel was the victim." I was just trying to keep the peace," Miller stammered. "You failed," Nia said. "Call the tower. Tell them we have a code 7500 situation on the ground. Disruptive passenger interfering with flight crew and federal law enforcement. Request immediate boarding by airport police." Patricia slumped into seat 2B. The fight had left her. The reality was crashing in. She looked around the cabin. Every single person was filming her. 20 phones were pointed at her face. She wasn't the predator anymore. She was the content. 10 minutes later, the wail of sirens pierced the thick glass of the fuselage. Blue and red lights reflected off the cabin walls, dancing across Patricia's terrified face. The aircraft door opened, and 3 officers from the Dulles Airport Police Department stormed in. They were big men, wearing tactical vests, led by a sergeant named Davis. "Who's the problem?" Sergeant Davis barked, scanning the first-class cabin. Patricia stood up instinctively, perhaps thinking she could still talk her way out of it. "Officers, thank God, this woman—" "Sit down!" Davis shouted at her. Nia stepped forward, flashing her credentials again. "Sergeant Davis, Agent Cross, USSS. I appreciate the quick response." Davis's demeanor changed instantly. He snapped a salute. "Agent Cross, dispatch said we have an interference charge." "Interference with a federal agent, assault, and disorderly conduct," Nia listed calmly. She also attempted to coerce the flight crew into violating federal anti-discrimination aviation laws. Nia pointed a long finger at Patricia. "That's her." Davis turned to Patricia. He pulled a pair of zip ties from his vest. "Mom, turn around. Hands behind your back." "You can't arrest me," Patricia shrieked, the panic returning. "I'm Patricia Sterling. I have rights. She provoked me. She put her baby in my face." "Turn around," Davis commanded, grabbing her wrist. Patricia resisted. She tried to pull her arm away, her fingernails raking across the sergeant's forearm. "Assault on a police officer," Davis said flatly. "Add it to the list." He spun her around with practiced ease, the sound of the zip ties tightening. Z-zip was the loudest sound in the world to Patricia. It was the sound of her life ending. "This is a mistake." Patricia was sobbing now, ugly, heaving sobs that ruined her makeup. "My bag, my Hermes bag, you can't leave it." "We'll check it into evidence," one of the other officers said, grabbing the expensive leather tote roughly. "Let's go," Davis said, shoving her toward the door. As Patricia was marched down the aisle, she looked at the faces of the people she had sneered at earlier. No one looked away. They watched her with a mixture of pity and satisfaction. When she passed row 3, the man holding Leo stood up. Leo was awake now, looking around with wide eyes. The man smiled at Nia. "Here's your boy, Agent Cross. He's a brave little guy, didn't make a peep during the fireworks." Nia took Leo into her arms, holding him tight. She buried her face in his neck for a second, grounding herself. The adrenaline was fading, leaving her shaking slightly. "Thank you," she whispered to the man. "What's your name?" "Tom," the man said. "And don't worry about witnesses. I got the whole thing in 4K, especially the part where she poked you." Nia smiled, a genuine tired smile. "Thanks, Tom." She turned back to the captain, who was standing by the cockpit door, wringing his hands. "Agent Cross," Miller started, "I want to formally apologize. I will write a full report detailing Ms. Sterling's behavior." Nia looked him up and down. "You'll write a report, all right? But it better detail your behavior too, Captain. Because if you leave out the part where you threatened to arrest me before asking for my ID, my report will contradict yours, and my report goes to the Department of Homeland Security." Miller swallowed hard. I understand." "We still have a flight to catch," Nia said, walking back to seat 2A. She sat down, buckling Leo in. "Unless you want to kick me off again." "No, ma'am, definitely not." Miller rushed back into the cockpit, eager to hide. Nia looked out the window. On the tarmac below, she saw Patricia Sterling being shoved into the back of a police cruiser. Her expensive coat was caught in the door. "Karma," Nia whispered to Leo. "It's a boomerang, baby. You throw it out, it comes back to hit you." The doors of Flight 492 closed with a heavy thud, sealing the cabin off from the chaos that had just occurred on the jet bridge. But inside the metal tube, the energy had shifted irrevocably. The air no longer smelled of stale coffee and tension. It smelled of ozone and adrenaline. Captain Miller, chastened and pale, made a mumbled announcement about a minor security delay and a swift departure. He didn't come out of the cockpit. He knew that 50% of the passengers on his plane were currently typing out complaints to the FAA about him. Back in seat 2A, Nia Cross finally exhaled. The rush of cortisol that came with unholstering her badge was fading, leaving behind a dull ache in her shoulders. Leo, sensing his mother's shift in energy, settled into her lap, clutching his stuffed rabbit. "You okay?" Nia looked up. It was Tom, the man in seat 3C who had held Leo. He was holding his phone, staring at the screen with wide eyes. "I'm fine," Nia said, her voice quiet. I hate making a scene. It's bad for the job." "Bad for the job?" Tom chuckled, shaking his head in disbelief. "Lady, you didn't make a scene. You stopped a crime, and you might want to prepare yourself. I uploaded the video 4 minutes ago. It already has 10,000 views." Nia closed her eyes. "Oh no." "Oh yes," Tom said. "The internet loves a villain, Agent Cross, and Patricia Sterling just auditioned for the lead role." While Nia was cruising at 30,000 feet, Patricia Sterling was experiencing a very different kind of altitude drop. She had been marched through the terminal, past the staring eyes of tourists and families, and shoved into the back of a Port Authority cruiser. The leather seats she was used to were replaced by hard plastic. The climate control was replaced by the smell of sweat and disinfectant. At the station, the indignities piled up like a car crash. "Name?" the booking officer, a woman named Sergeant Alvarez, asked without looking up. "I demand to speak to the police chief," Patricia stated, lifting her chin. Even in handcuffs, with her mascara smearing, she tried to summon the ghost of her authority. Do you know who I am? I am the VP of Marketing for Global Tech. This is a false arrest. Sergeant Alvarez looked up slowly. She had been working the airport beat for 15 years. She had seen drunks, smugglers, and fighters. She had zero patience for entitlement. Name, Alvarez repeated, her voice flat. Patricia. Sterling. Patricia spat the words out. And I want my phone. I need to call my lawyer. I need to call the press. You'll get your phone when you're processed, Alvarez said. Right now, you need to remove your jewelry. Earrings, necklace, watch. Put them in the tray. Patricia's hands trembled as she unclasped her diamond tennis bracelet. It hit the plastic tray with a cheap clatter. Then came the shoes. Her $600 Italian heels were taken away, replaced by orange foam slides that were 2 sizes too big. This is ridiculous, Patricia muttered, as she was led to the fingerprint scanner. My brother-in-law is on the board of the airline. You people are going to be fired, all of you. The officer, grabbing her thumb to press it against the glass, didn't even blink. Turn to the right. Chin up. Flash. The mugshot. The moment captured in harsh, unforgiving fluorescent light. It showed a woman who looked haggard, angry, and small. It was the face of someone realizing that the world was not her employee. They placed her in a holding cell with a woman who had been caught smuggling exotic birds in her luggage. Patricia sat on the cold metal bench, pulling her cashmere coat tight around her, trying not to touch the walls. For the first time in 20 years, Patricia Sterling was powerless. By the time Flight 492 reached cruising altitude over the Midwest, the video titled, Karen Tries to Kick Secret Service Mom Off Plane, Gets Destroyed, had jumped from TikTok to Twitter, X, and from there to the front page of Reddit. The algorithm fed on the engagement. It was the perfect storm of content, a clear villain, a defenseless child, a heroic twist, and a satisfying conclusion. The comments rolled in faster than the human eye could read. Justice served cold. Did you see her face when the badge came out? I've watched it 50 times. It's art. Elia's Flight Bay 99. As a flight attendant, this makes me cry happy tears. We deal with Patricias every day. Finally, someone stood up to one. Internet detective. Found her. That's Patricia Sterling. She works at Global Tech Solutions in DC. Here is her public LinkedIn profile. She lists crisis management as a skill. The irony is delicious. Within 2 hours, the hashtag #Flight4292 was trending #1 in the United States. Then, the memes started. Screenshots of Patricia's finger poking Naya's chest were captioned with "moments before disaster." Remixes of her saying, "Do you know who I am?" were set to clown music. But the internet didn't just laugh, it mobilized. Thousands of users flooded the social media pages of Global Tech Solutions. They commented on every post, from their charity announcements to their product launches. Why do you employ racists? Is this your VP of marketing? I will be cancelling my contract with your firm until she is gone. The pressure wasn't just social, it was financial. Global Tech was a publicly traded company. As the video went viral, the stock ticker began to twitch. Investors hate volatility, and nothing screams volatility like a C-suite executive being arrested for assaulting a federal agent. In a glass-walled conference room in downtown DC, 3 miles from where Patricia was currently sitting in a cell, the real consequences were being decided. Marcus Thorne, the CEO of Global Tech, was staring at a tablet. His face was a mask of fury. "How many views?" he asked. 12 million across all platforms, sir," his head of PR said, her voice shaking and climbing. "CNN just reached out for a comment. TMZ is running the mug shot in 10 minutes. Thorne threw the tablet onto the table. "She assaulted a Secret Service agent? Is she insane?" "She claims it was a misunderstanding," the PR head said. "But the video is... It's damning, Marcus. She uses slurs, she abuses the staff, and she explicitly drops the company name. Thorne stood up and walked to the window. He didn't care about Patricia. He cared about the Q3 earnings report. "She's a liability," Thorne said coldly. "If we keep her, we look like we endorse this. The contract with the Defense Department comes up for renewal next month. We can't have a VP with a felony charge on the payroll." "So, suspension?" the PR head suggested. "No," Thorne turned around. "Termination. For cause. Violation of the morality clause in her contract. Cut her loose, and draft a statement. Make it strong. We condemn racism. We support law enforcement. Blah, blah, blah. Get it out before the evening news." "What about her severance? Her stock options?" Thorne smiled, a shark-like grin. "She was fired for criminal misconduct. She gets nothing. Not a dime." Nia felt the landing gear lock into place as the plane descended toward Los Angeles. The cabin lights flickered on. As the plane taxied to the gate, Chloe, the flight attendant, walked down the aisle. She stopped at row 2. "Agent Cross?" Chloe whispered. "The captain asked me to tell you that police are waiting at the jet bridge." Nia stiffened. "For me?" "No," Chloe smiled. "To escort you. To make sure the paparazzi don't bother you. Apparently, there are cameras waiting in the terminal." Nia sighed. "Great." She gathered her bags, hoisting a sleepy Leo onto her hip. As she stood up, the strangest thing happened. The man across the aisle, the businessman who had buried his face in the Wall Street Journal earlier, started to clap. Then Tom joined in. Then the couple in row 4. It wasn't a raucous applause. It was a slow, respectful ripple of clapping that moved through the first-class cabin and bled into economy. It was an acknowledgement, a thank you for popping the bubble of entitlement that suffocated them all. Nia didn't wave. She just nodded, her face flushing slightly, and walked off the plane. Back in the holding cell, the door buzzed open. "Sterling," Sergeant Alvarez called out. "Your lawyer is here. You can make your call now." Patricia stumbled out. She felt stripped raw. She walked to the desk where her belongings were returned. She grabbed her phone with desperate hands. She turned it on. It vibrated instantly, a continuous buzz of notifications that nearly shook it out of her hand. 150 missed calls. 4,000 new emails. She ignored the unknown numbers. She dialed her assistant, Sarah. "Sarah!" Patricia hissed into the phone. "Where have you been? Why isn't the company lawyer here? I need bail money. Get the company card." There was a long silence on the other end. "Patricia!" Sarah's voice sounded strange, distant. I can't do that." "What do you mean you can't? I'm your boss. I'm the vice president." "No," Sarah said, and Patricia could hear the tremble in her voice. "You're not. Not anymore. Corporate sent an email blast 10 minutes ago. Your access is revoked. Security is packing up your office right now." Patricia felt the blood drain from her legs. The room spun. They fired me." "They terminated you," Sarah corrected. "Effective immediately. And Patricia, please don't call this number again. HR is monitoring my line." Click. Patricia stared at the phone. The screen lit up with a news alert from the Washington Post. Viral video fallout. Global Tech VP ousted after assaulting federal agent. She looked at the photo accompanying the article. It was a screenshot from the video. Her face, twisted in hate, finger pointing. She looked up at the sergeant. "My cards," Patricia whispered. "My credit cards." "In the bag," Alvarez said. Patricia ripped the bag open. She pulled out her platinum Amex. She needed a car. She needed a hotel. She needed to get away. She opened her banking app to check her balance. Account frozen. Suspicious activity. Because she was being charged with a federal crime, involving financial influence, thanks to her call to Richard. And because the airline was suing her for damages, a temporary freeze had been placed on her assets, pending the bail hearing. Patricia Sterling stood in the middle of the police station lobby, wearing oversized orange slides and a wrinkled coat. She had no job. She had no access to her money. She had no friends coming to get her. She walked over to the plastic chairs in the waiting area and sat down. She looked at the TV mounted on the wall. It was playing the video. She watched herself on screen, screaming at a mother and baby, and for the first time, she didn't see a powerful woman demanding respect. She saw a fool digging her own grave. 3,000 miles away, Nia walked out of the LAX terminal. The flashbulbs went off, pop, 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 but the police officers formed a wedge, guiding her through the crowd. "Agent Cross! Agent Cross! Did you know she was a VP? Agent Cross, what do you have to say to people calling you a hero?" Nia didn't stop. She didn't speak to the press. That wasn't the job. She reached the curb where her sister, Maya, was waiting in a beat-up Honda Odyssey. Nia buckled Leo into the car seat. He was finally awake, babbling about the airplane lady. Maya hugged Nia hard. "I saw it," Maya whispered. "I saw the news. Are you in trouble?" Nia pulled back. She checked her phone. There was a text from her direct superior at the Secret Service. "Saw the footage. Director says nice restraint. Legal team is standing by if she tries to sue, but it looks like Global Tech already fired her. Enjoy your leave. Don't spend the whole time signing autographs." Nia smiled. She got into the passenger seat and closed the door, shutting out the noise of the airport. "No," Nia said, looking at her sister. "I'm not in trouble. But I think the lady in 2B is about to have a very bad year." As the car pulled away into the LA traffic, Nia finally relaxed. She was just a mom again. But the world knew better. The world knew that beneath the hoodie and the diaper bag was a force of nature that you did not mess with. Karma had been served, swift and digital, and it tasted sweet. The downfall of Patricia Sterling was not a sudden drop. It was a slow, agonizing slide into a nightmare of her own making. 3 months after the incident on Flight 492, Patricia sat in the plush, mahogany-paneled office of Harrison Cole, the most expensive defense attorney in Washington, D.C., outside of a political scandal. The view from the window showed the Capitol building, a symbol of the power Patricia used to believe she possessed. Now, it just looked like a fortress designed to keep people like her out. "They are offering a deal, Patricia," Harrison said, sliding a manila folder across the polished desk. He looked tired. Representing Patricia was like trying to represent a hurricane that blamed the houses for being in its path. "Plead guilty to the misdemeanor interference charge. The felony assault gets dropped. You do 500 hours of community service, pay a $50,000 fine, and issue a public apology to Agent Cross." Patricia laughed. It was a brittle, sharp sound, like glass breaking. She adjusted the collar of her blouse, no longer Chanel, but a muted Brooks Brothers piece her PR consultant had suggested. "Apologize," Patricia sneered. "Harrison, look at me. I am the victim here. That woman tricked me. She didn't identify herself until after she provoked me. And now the airline fired me. Global Tech fired me. I am going to sue them all. I want to take this to trial. I want a jury to see how I was treated." Harrison rubbed his temples. "Patricia, listen to me. A jury isn't going to see a victim. They are going to see the viral video that has 40 million views. They are going to see you poking a federal agent in the chest. If we go to trial, federal prosecutors aren't going to play nice. They are going to bring the hammer down." "Let them," Patricia said, checking her manicure. "My brother-in-law Richard will testify. He's on the board of Meridian. He'll explain that the captain was incompetent." Harrison looked at her with a strange expression, a mix of pity and alarm. You haven't heard from Richard lately, have you?" "He's been busy," Patricia said dismissively. "He's handling the PR fallout for the airline." "Patricia," Harrison said softly, "Richard isn't handling PR. Richard is currently being interviewed by the FBI, and it's because of you." The twist that no one saw coming, the twist that turned a simple case of air rage into a corporate tragedy, began with a simple subpoena. When Nia Cross filed her report, she had to document every aspect of the interference. That included the phone call Patricia made to Richard Halloway. Because Patricia had used her phone to facilitate the obstruction of a federal officer, her call logs and the recipient's logs were subject to review by the Department of Homeland Security. Agent specialized in financial crimes, investigating the influence Patricia claimed to have, flagged the call. They wanted to know if Richard Halloway had a history of intervening in security protocols. They didn't find security breaches. They found money. Richard Halloway, the man Patricia thought was her safety net, had been running a ghost fuel scheme for 5 years. He had been approving contracts for jet fuel surcharges to a shell company in the Cayman Islands, a company he secretly owned. He was skimming pennies off every gallon Meridian Air bought. It added up to $15 million. No one had noticed. The audit trails were clean. But when the FBI pulled his records to investigate Patricia's claim of influence, they saw the anomaly. A spotlight had been shone into a dark room because Patricia Sterling had been too arrogant to sit in seat 2B. The United States District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia is a serious place. It lacks the theatrical flair of television courtrooms. It is cold, efficient, and terrifying. On the first day of United States versus Sterling, the courtroom was packed. The gallery was filled with journalists, bloggers, and former employees of Global Tech who had come to watch their old tyrant boss face the music. The prosecutor was Assistant U.S. Attorney Marcus Thorne. He was a man known for his surgical precision. He didn't yell, he dissected. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Thorne began in his opening statement, walking slowly in front of the jury box. "Entitlement is not a crime. Being rude is not a crime. But when you physically assault a federal agent, when you endanger the safety of a flight carrying 140 souls because you believe your social status exempts you from the law, that is a felony. And we will prove that Ms. Sterling didn't just make a mistake. She made a choice." Patricia sat at the defense table, her back rigid. She refused to look at the jury. She still believed deep down that this was all a misunderstanding that money could fix. Nia Cross took the stand on the second day. She didn't wear her uniform. She wore a simple navy suit. She spoke with the calm, detached professionalism of a veteran agent. "Agent Cross," Thorne asked, "at any point did you act aggressively toward the defendant?" "No, sir," Nia replied. "My primary concern was the safety of my child and the de-escalation of the cabin." "And when did you decide to reveal your identity?" "When Miss Sterling physically assaulted me by poking my chest and attempted to coerce the flight crew into removing me based on discriminatory factors. At that point, the situation had escalated from a passenger dispute to a security threat. Harrison Cole, Patricia's lawyer, tried to cross-examine her. He tried to paint Nia as instigating the fight by not moving seats. "Agent Cross," Harrison said, "if you had simply moved to the back of the plane as requested, none of this would have happened, correct?" Nia looked him dead in the eye. "Mr. Cole, if I had moved to the back of the plane, I would have been validating the illegal demand that a black mother doesn't belong in first class. I am a federal officer sworn to uphold the Constitution. I do not yield to bigotry because it is convenient." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Ideally, a lawyer wants to rattle the witness. Instead, Harrison had just given the jury a soundbite that would be played on the news for weeks. But the real damage came from the video. When Thorne played the footage from Tom's phone, the courtroom went silent. On the large screens, everyone watched Patricia's face twist into a snarl. They heard the ghetto comment in high definition. They saw the poke. Patricia, watching herself on the screen, finally shrank. For the first time, she saw what the world saw. A monster. The defense had promised a star witness. They had promised Richard Halloway would take the stand to testify to Patricia's character and the captain's incompetence. On day 3, the doors opened, and Richard Halloway walked in. But he didn't walk in from the public entrance. He walked in from the side door, wearing an orange jumpsuit and shackles. Patricia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Richard," she whispered. She hadn't known. Harrison Cole looked down at his notes, defeated. He had known, but he couldn't stop the prosecution from calling him. Richard took the stand. He looked aged, hollowed out. He had signed a cooperation agreement that morning. He would testify against Patricia to shave 2 years off his own sentence for embezzlement. "Mr. Halloway," Thorne asked, "can you tell the court about the phone call you received from the defendant on the day in question?" "She called me screaming," Richard said, his voice raspy. He refused to look at Patricia. "She wanted me to fire the pilot. She wanted me to have the passenger arrested." "And what was the result of that call, Mr. Halloway?" Richard looked up, his eyes filled with venom. He looked directly at Patricia. "Because of that call, federal investigators subpoenaed my records. They found my business arrangements. I was 2 weeks away from retiring to the Caymans. I had it all set up." He leaned into the microphone, his voice trembling with rage. "She called me over a seat assignment. A seat assignment. And because she couldn't check her ego, she burned my entire life to the ground. She didn't just interfere with a flight crew. She exposed a $15 million operation because she wanted to feel important for 5 minutes. The courtroom was stunned. This wasn't just a witness. This was a man explaining how Patricia's karma had detonated a bomb that took out her entire family circle. "She is toxic," Richard spat. "She destroys everything she touches." Patricia put her head in her hands and began to weep. Not for Richard, but for herself. She realized then that she was truly alone. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. It would have been shorter, but they wanted a free lunch. When they returned, the foreman, a middle-aged school teacher, stood up. "In the matter of the United States versus Patricia Sterling, on the count of interference with flight crew members and attendants, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of simple assault on a federal officer, guilty. On the count of disorderly conduct, guilty." Patricia didn't move. She felt as if she were underwater. The noise of the gallery was a dull roar. 2 weeks later, Judge Whitman sat high on his bench to deliver the sentence. He was known as a fair judge, but he had zero patience for the waste of court resources. "Ms. Sterling," Judge Whitman said, peering over his spectacles, "I have read the pre-sentencing report. I have read the letters of support, of which there were very few. And I have watched the video." He paused, letting the silence hang heavy in the air. "You are a woman of immense privilege. You had wealth, a high-ranking job, and status. And yet, when confronted with a young mother and a baby, you chose cruelty. You chose to weaponize your status. You thought that because you were in seat 2B, you were the ruler of the sky. But what strikes me most," the judge continued, "is your lack of remorse. Even now, your statement to the probation officer blames the airline, blames the stress, and blames the victim. Society relies on a social contract, Ms. Sterling. We agree to treat each other with basic dignity. You shredded that contract, and then you tried to use corruption, via your brother-in-law, to cover your tracks. It is poetic justice that your attempt to use your connections is exactly what destroyed them. Patricia Sterling, I am sentencing you to 30 months in a federal correctional institution. Patricia let out a sharp cry. 2.5 years. Following your release, the judge added, you will serve 3 years of supervised probation. You are also ordered to pay restitution to Meridian Airlines in the amount of $50,000 for the flight disruption and a punitive fine of $200,000. And regarding your request to serve your time in the minimum security camp at Alderson? The judge shook his head. Denied. Due to the assault on a federal officer, you will be placed in a medium security facility. Take the defendant into custody. The bailiff moved in. This time, there was no disbelief in Patricia's eyes. There was only terror. She stood up, her legs shaking so badly she almost fell. She looked back at the gallery, searching for a friendly face. Harrison Cole was packing his briefcase, already thinking about his next client. The journalists were typing furiously on their phones. The only person looking at her was Nia Cross. Nia was sitting in the back row. She didn't look happy. She didn't look triumphant. She just looked done. She gave Patricia a single, slow nod, not of forgiveness, but of closure. As the heavy wooden door to the holding cell opened, the smell of stale air and disinfectant wafted out. It was a smell Patricia would come to know intimately. The door clicked shut behind her, the heavy thud echoing the finality of her choices. Outside the courthouse, the sun was shining. Nia walked down the marble steps, putting her sunglasses on. Her phone buzzed. It was a notification from her bank. Her paycheck had deposited. It wasn't millions like Richard stole. It wasn't a fortune like Patricia lost. But it was clean. It was honest. Nia took a deep breath of the fresh DC air. She had a flight to catch later that day, economy class, and she couldn't wait to sit next to whoever was there, because she knew that true power wasn't about where you sat. It was about who you were. The hard karma had hit. The cycle was complete, and somewhere in a cell, Patricia Sterling was finally learning that the world didn't revolve around her. It spun right over her. And that is how Patricia Sterling went from a platinum flyer to a federal inmate in less than a year. It's a brutal reminder that character is how you treat people who can do nothing for you. Patricia thought Nia was a nobody, and that mistake cost her everything: her job, her fortune, and her freedom. What do you think? Was 2 years in prison too harsh, or did she get exactly what she deserved? And have you ever witnessed someone instantly regret their entitlement like this? Let me know your stories in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story about karma hitting back. Thanks for watching. And remember, be kind, because you never know who you're sitting next to.